To everybody. This is the revision tutorial videos for biology, and specifically today we are looking at viruses. Okay, if you guys can recall, we did viruses under the chapter of diversity of living organisms, where we were supposed to look at the interactions of organisms with each other in the ecosystems. Okay, so today we will be looking at viruses, most interesting because we are facing this pandemic of the coronavirus. Okay, so I have a very strong feeling that these examiners by the end of this year, which is the external exams, they might include these questions. Okay, so when they give us these questions, we should be able to answer them. Okay, so we should be prepared. Okay, so I will try and make this short as possible in order not to bore you guys with my talking. Okay, so for this video or for this topic, there are some few objectives in the syllabus that we need to look at, which include the first one. By the end of this chapter or this revision video, you guys should be able to identify and label the structure of viruses. Okay, so you should be able to label and identify the structure of viruses. You guys are also expected to outline the arguments for and against the classification of viruses as living organisms. Okay, those are our two objectives for this video. Okay, so let's start off with the structure of a virus. So what do we know about the structure of viruses? We know that viruses are very simple organisms, okay, which consist of a DNA or an RNA strain surrounded by a protein coat. That's the structure or the general structure of a virus. Okay, so for your exams and for your questions, they will usually bring out a diagram like this. Okay, so where you will be able to, where you are expected to label the capsid, the DNA, and also the glycoproteins. That's the general structure of a virus for your level. Okay, that you need to know. Okay, so let's continue. uh, let's talk about some of the characteristics of viruses. Okay, so we know that viruses are very small. Okay, they are so small, we say that their size compared to the bacteria is like 1/100 of the size of a bacteria. So they are extremely smaller than bacteria also. Okay, so their sizes range from 30 nanometers to 300 nanometers. Okay, so viruses are very small and you cannot even see them with your naked eyes. Even with a light microscope, you cannot see a virus. Okay, so you need a very strong electron microscope for you to view a virus. Okay, viruses are also said to be non-cellular. So what do they mean when they say something is non-cellular? By non-cellular, they mean that this organism is not made up of cells. Okay, so if this organism is not made up of cells, we say it is non-cellular. An organism that is made up of cells, its cell must contain the following organelles: a cell membrane, a nucleus, mitochondria, cytoplasm, etc., even the cell wall. Okay, but for a virus does not have any of these organelles, so it is said to be non-cellular. Okay, viruses are also said to be parasitic. By parasitic, they mean that viruses depend on other organisms or other cells for them to reproduce. Okay, for them to reproduce. Okay, because that's the only characteristic a virus carries out. A virus does not grow, a virus does not excrete, a virus does not feed, a virus only reproduce. Out of all 7 characteristics, a virus only carries out one, which is reproduction. Okay, in order for them to reproduce, so they need to invade a host cell. Okay, so which is a living cell, and then they take over the activities of this cell in order for them to reproduce. So by doing this, in this process, they also kill the host cell. So we refer to viruses as being parasitic. Okay, unlike bacteria is a different relationship with living cells, which can be mutualistic, or we can say they have a mutual relationship with some of the living cells in which they both benefit. But with viruses, it is purely parasitic. Okay, so they depend on the host cell for them to reproduce, and in the process they also kill the host cell. That's why we say it is parasitic. So let's start with the arguments used by some of the scientists to classify viruses as living organisms. Okay, so there are arguments concerning the classification of viruses as either living or non-living. Okay, so when you say a virus is living, you are only backed up with one reason, which is the fact that they reproduce. Okay, which is that the fact that they reproduce and they consist of DNA. Okay, but for those that are saying viruses are non-living, they are backed up with reasons which include they need a host cell for them to reproduce. They do not reproduce on their own, I mean. Okay, and that out of all 7 characteristics, they only carried out one. If we look at this diagram, we can see I'm trying to differentiate between a virus and then a cell. Okay, where we say that they reproduce within a host cell, while other living cells they can reproduce independently. Okay, viruses do not carry out growth, while normal cells they carry out growth. Okay, uh, viruses do not respond to the environment, or they do not respond to any stimuli, while living cells do respond. Okay, so viruses, for you to say that the viruses are living organisms, you are only backed with one reason. Okay, but for those that are saying viruses are non-living, they have reasons such as um, they cannot reproduce on their own, and out of all 7 characteristics, they only carry out one. So these are the arguments used in the classification of viruses as living or non-living. So how do viruses reproduce? Okay, so for a virus to reproduce, a virus needs to invade a host cell. Okay, so a host cell is a living cell. So what this virus does, it attaches to this cell, and then it injects its genetic material inside the nucleus of the living cell, and then it starts to replicate. Okay, or it starts to reproduce other viruses. Okay, so after it has reproduced these viruses, this virus also leaves these living cells to infect other bodies again. And in this whole process, it kills the host cell. Okay, so I have a small demonstration here, which will allow us to understand a little bit of the reproduction process of viruses. Okay, so for this demonstration, we have a solution which is containing of which contains viruses, and then we also have a small petri dish with living cells. Okay, so inside the dropper pipette there, we said we have the virus. Okay, so we drop a small amount of virus into the petri dish, and inside the petri dish we have a group of living cells. Okay, so on each surface of all living cells we have receptors. Okay, so these receptors binds with the virus. Okay, as the virus binds with these receptors, it injects the genomes. Okay, the genome is now the DNA. Okay, so the DNA goes to the nucleus, and it takes over the activities of the cell, and then it starts to replicate. Okay, so it forms a whole lot number of viruses, and then these viruses again go out to infect other living cells. Okay, so we have reached the end of this revision video. I hope you guys got something out of this. Please stay safe. Corona is real. Let's take care. Okay, so this video is going to be accompanied by a group of questions. Okay, so try and answer these questions, please, guys. Please have a good day and safe quarantine.